As a student, Frank Auerbach sold his paintings from a London pavement. His work now commands significant prices and hangs in the world's major museums and private collections. Since 1954, he worked in the same studio in Mornington Crescent every single day of the year, except for Christmas Day, right up until his death in 2024. Born in Berlin in 1931, he was sent to live in England at the age of 8. He remembers his parents giving him a box of paints for his 5th birthday. Auerbach attributes his dedication and making the most use of his time to the fact that he lost both his parents in the Second World War at Auschwitz at such a young age. He never made any attempt to find out any more about what happened to them. He said a pivotal moment in his life, and one that inspired and influenced him to become an artist, was when he first saw Turner's The Fighting Temeraire. Of the school of London painters, including Francis Bacon and Lucian Freud, Auerbach's work is the most difficult to understand. But in the end, I think it's the most satisfying. There is a magical purity to his application of paint that is unique in the world of art. Auerbach's technique is well described, largely through a number of interviews crafted and recorded by sitters and writers throughout his lifetime. He sketches, he draws, he paints on board and on canvas, in oil, as well as, to a lesser extent, acrylic. He takes a long time to produce each painting, and key to this process is scraping back. After each session, he scrapes off the paint and begins again at the beginning of each day, repeating this process day after day, not primarily to create a layering of images, but because of a sense of dissatisfaction which drives him forward, leading him to try and paint it again and again until, as he puts it, the painting has an independent life of its own. Testament to this activity are a number of photographs of the artist in his studio, where Auerbach is surrounded by paint scrapings which build up around his easel. His drawings do not escape this process of redaction either. Their patchwork of support with built-up layers of papers and charcoal and chalk, absolute evidence of his working practice. Auerbach's surfaces change over time, as does his palette. The wrinkled, thick, earlier oil on canvas, for example in EOW Nude, dating from 1959, has some scraping back evident around the figure, but is largely left built up. This is in part why it wrinkles, something the artist does not mind. The palette is subdued, earthy pigments, whites and blacks. He could not afford much colour at the time when he was painting these works in the 50s. He says, "I use all sorts of instruments, even sometimes my hands, to apply the paint." His mark making develops over time, with brushes, palette knives, putty scrapers, and sometimes paint squeezed directly from the tube. A painting titled To the Studios 1990-1991 was repainted from top to bottom hundreds of times, scraping down again and again and again. In the mid-90s, not long after this painting was acquired, Tate conservators asked if he could describe his working practice, and he could not. He said, "Painting is not manufactured. Each picture has its own history. The only constants are the fact that it always takes a long time, sometimes a very long time." Head of JYM 1984 to 1985 is one of Auerbach's greatest masterpieces and one of my favourite paintings by the artist. It's a culmination of a 40-year friendship between him and the sitter Julia Yardley Mills, in which he painted her many times. Ultimately, he is trying to strip away edifice and get to the soul of the sitter with intense observation. In this painting, you can see the most extreme forms of brushwork applied wet in wet. So you get this incredible coalescent style of paint, but it's also the sheer impasto of the paint that gives the image such immediacy and physicality and power. This, in my opinion, is the greatest portrait Frank Auerbach ever created. He eventually broke through the art world due to his sheer force of will and dedication to his craft. He died on the 11th of November 2024 at the age of 93.